The crazy thing is he argued to keep me in prison longer to continue the cover-up, and that was his argument. He didn't have any other argument to keep me in. It was just, yes, this is illegal. We're illegal doing it, but if we let him out, all these other thousands of people can then use this case to get out. So, Judge, just let it go. It's insane.
Welcome to this week's episode of Going Rogue with Lara Logan. For our guests, today we have Brian Mock. He is a man whose name may be familiar to you if you are a consumer of fake news. You might recognize him as a January 6 terrorist, as MSNBC would have you believe, along with half the Republican Party and, of course, many Democrats. None of which is actually true. Why am I talking to Brian Mock? Not just because he's a January 6th defendant and his story is powerful and compelling and a lesson to all of us, because none of us want our law enforcement to treat anyone in America the way they've treated him. But we're talking with Brian because since coming out of prison and being pardoned by President Donald Trump, Brian Mock has devoted his time to prison reform. And that may sound counterintuitive to you. Really, it isn't. I spoke to Brian. I think, Brian, you and I spoke right after you came out, and we were both very much consumed with prison reform because of the experience for many reasons. But one of them was that so many January 6 defendants had their eyes opened, being behind bars for the first time in their lives, being in contact with the criminal justice system for the first time in their lives. I mean, I know there were January 6 defendants, who had checkered past and had been in and out of prison. But, when you're talking about 1,600 people, the vast majority of those people were law-abiding people who had never run into trouble with the law. And so it was a revelation to really find out when you're up close, the prison system in the United States of America leaves much to be desired in many ways. The conditions are just appalling. The contractors who control everything, are scamming the government. I mean, boy, if you want to find fraud, we haven't even begun to look at the prison system. And not only that, but of course, there are so many people in there. I was shocked many years ago to discover that there are people in jail whose sentences are over and they can't even get the case officer or whoever is responsible in the prison to meet with them to release them. These are people, many of whom have been forgotten, abandoned by society, tossed aside, and none of this ever gets a fair hearing because it's like, oh, nobody wants to be defending criminals. Anyway, these are some of the issues I know that I've confronted, that you and I have talked about in the past. I know that you were not only motivated by the injustice in your own case, but also by what you witnessed happening to other January 6 defendants and other people in prison. Many of whom, of course, were black men, right? Who I understand from a lot of January 6 defendants that it was a lot of the brothers in prison who rallied around them and supported them and helped them adjust and figure out prison life and survive behind bars, right? And so there were a lot of bonds that were formed that would appear to be against the narrative if you believe the nonsense that everyone who voted for Donald Trump is a racist, which is just obviously so dishonest and fake. It's ridiculous. If you've been watching the markets, you already know gold and silver are exploding, and it's not an accident. When inflation rises, when the dollar weakens, when the world becomes unpredictable, smart people move toward assets that have stood the test of thousands of years. And right now, more Americans than ever are protecting their retirement savings with physical gold and silver. Gold has surged. Silver is climbing fast, and experts believe we may just be at the beginning of the next major run. The question isn't, should I do something? The real question is, can I afford to wait? Because every week, people who waited are now wishing they'd acted sooner.
If you want to understand how to protect the wealth you've already built and how to position yourself before the next big move, go to laralovesgold.com or call 800-888-0807. That's 800-888-0807. When you reach out, notice how confident you'll feel, knowing you're finally taking control of your financial future instead of letting the headlines control you. Go to laralovesgold.com or call 800-888-0807 right now. Your future self will thank you for the decision you make today.
So anyway, I'm talking way too much. We have been waiting for an opportunity to sit down, and the one of the things that sort of prompted you and I having this discussion right now is that your name came up in some of the hearings on the Hill on fraud in Minnesota. So we're going to go into that, but just so people understand who you are, you're more than a January 6th defendant. You're a dad. You're from Minnesota. And tell me a little bit about how you got yourself into trouble on January 6th.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, first off. It's been a long time coming. So, yeah, we've had a number of conversations about this crazy 5 years. I always tell people my life became fiction 5 years ago, and the story just keeps getting weirder and weirder. So I was vice president of my company. I built up a lawn care landscape company. I was raising my 4 boys. All in all, it's pretty boring. I didn't think my life was that exciting. I wasn't that political. My first political rally was January 6th because I can sure pick them. So
that's quite something. The first time you had ever been to a political rally was January 6th.
Yep.
Wow.
Why not? I go big or go home. So, yeah, the whole thing is bizarre because I'm one of the 81 most heavily charged Jan 6ers. I never went in the building. I never destroyed anything. And one of the things that I heard recently was somebody was still talking about, hey, we could never support anybody who assaulted police. And I have to pause with people, and I understand that sentiment. But they need to understand on January 6th, I was one of the most heavily charged individuals. I was one of the absolute worst. My 2 charges that I was held pretrial for was pushing an officer with my bare hands.
Which they would call assault of a police officer, right?
Right. And one of those assaults never occurred. We proved that in court. And actually, the DOJ abandoned the whole narrative that I had actually pushed them very early on. The other one, I pushed the shield when he threatened to shoot me. When I turned down their plea deal, they enhanced this to now 4 alleged assaults. One, they like to talk about a deadly and dangerous weapon, saying that I threw a flagpole at an officer. Well, I had actually been getting hit in the head with a flagpole, and I reached up and a piece broke off. It was about yay long, and I threw it to an open area. Judge Boasberg, all people, was my judge. We'll get into that later. But he literally laughed it out of court. He laughed at my AUSA, and he said, by your logic, I could throw this sticky pad here off my desk at you, and it might hit you in the eye, and that could cause a paper cut. And by that logic, that would be an assault. And so it was laughable. But the way that they charged me was, hey, I didn't take their crappy plea deal early on. So they got a superseding indictment, and they started tacking on the 1512 obstruction charge, more BS assaults, and that was one of them. And to this day, now on the floor of Congress, I have congressmen out there saying, oh, this guy threw a flagpole at police officers. Well, no, I didn't. I was being hit by one, and I threw a piece literally right out of my hand to an open area. So that's the kind of stuff where you talk about us evil insurrectionists that are the heavily charged people assaulting police officers. That wasn't the case.
So if you look at it on paper, Brian, you are a violent criminal who assaulted police officers. Were you convicted of, so you had 2 charges initially, and then when you turned down the plea deal, they kept adding charges. What were you ultimately convicted of?
While the global financial elite has been secretly accumulating wealth through cryptocurrency, ordinary Americans have been systematically excluded. So today, I want to tell you about Block Trust IRA. They're bringing crypto wealth to everyday people using advanced AI technology that breaks the stranglehold of the hidden powers who control our financial system. I've partnered with Block Trust IRA because I believe there's an intentional barrier between regular people and financial independence, and it's created by those who don't want to share what you're entitled to. Block Trust IRA has a powerful trading platform, Animus AI, and it works 24/7, analyzing market data and executing advanced crypto strategies beyond the simple buy and hold. It exposes the lie that regular people like us should just sit and hold, while hedge fund elites trade with sophisticated algorithms. That's why their system was named the #1 crypto technology platform by Bitcoin Magazine, and it beat out over 1,500 global competitors. So whether you're a teacher or a truck driver or a small business owner or a retiree, and you're watching manipulated markets erode your 401k, Block Trust IRA's Animus AI arms you with the same tools insiders use against financial tyranny. Clients are seeing over 250% returns on their investments, protected by military-grade security and up to $200 million in insurance against interference. Don't wait. Visit LaraLoganCrypto.com to join the financial revolution, fighting back against the hidden powers keeping you dependent on their failing system. For a limited time, they're offering viewers up to $2,500 in bonus crypto when you open an account. Crypto created 80,000 new millionaires just last year. Why not you? Visit LaraLoganCrypto.com. That's LaraLoganCrypto.com for financial freedom.
So I rolled into court with 11 felonies. For 3 years, they had the 3 on the table. And actually, the funny thing is they offered me a plea deal before I ever saw any discovery. They immediately, this plea deal said, say you did all the things that we said you did. Donald Trump was at fault. He's the one that caused this all.
Yeah.
And we'll take it easy on you, as though 3 years was going easy on me. So, of course, I turned that down. That was ridiculous. And I fired my attorney, represented myself, and then continued to get retaliated against in the DC jail because I was denied pretrial freedom. I was detained by Judge Howell, saying that I was a danger to society, that there were no conditions she could put on me pretrial where the general public would be safe if I was out amongst everyone.
And you're a person with no criminal record.
No, I did have a criminal record, but it wasn't, it was decades old. And
What did you do?
they later, I have the dumbest gun charge ever. I had a BB gun on me when I confronted 3 teenagers that were committing arson behind my house during a party for my 7-year-old at the time. They tried to make that at sentencing. The DOJ said that I held children hostage.
Wow.
They also claimed that I had an active restraining order against me that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. They also claimed that I had a domestic against me that doesn't exist. They just literally made up things to try to make me look as bad as they could. That's been reiterated through Reuters at this point. But, I was going to clients' houses, 6 to 8 people every single day at my work, around their kids, around their dogs. I, taking my kids to all their sports and music things. The idea that I'm somehow dangerous is
pretty much just a regular dad. I mean, and you're certainly not somebody, with a long criminal history. Put it that way.
No.
Okay, so you, so did the FBI come and arrest you the way they did many other J6s, or how did it all go down?
Yeah, the crazy thing is this was 5 months later. My ex got a phone call from the FBI, and she calls me and says, well, awkward phone call. Apparently you're on this list, sedition hunters. You're number 296, and the FBI's asking about you. And I, of course, freaked out because neither high school nor college prepare you to be on an FBI wanted list.
No.
And so I'm going, what the hell? This has to be a mistake. I didn't go in the building. I didn't destroy anything. I'm not part of some militia. I just need to talk to him. And so I contacted a lawyer, and they said, hey, this is how this is going to go down. Talk to the public defender's office. And I said, look, I'll walk into the FBI field office down here. We'll have a conversation, and I'll be that. She contacted them. They refused to talk to me. 3 weeks later, I'm walking out on a Friday morning to go to a job site, and they come screeching up, 13 cars or so. They got guns drawn. They're screaming at me. And I freaked out. I was so nonchalant about it. I was like, well, what took y'all so long? And I had all my stuff sitting there waiting for them. I was fully cooperative. And the FBI agent even expected that I was going to go in, see a judge, get released. And that's what the Minnesota magistrate ruled. And they appealed it to D.C. and put it in front of Chief Judge Howell. And
Beryl Howell.
Changed.
Yeah.
Yep, Beryl Howell. Oh, she's a gem. So they had created a new criteria for us of quote unquote dangers that flew in the face of the Bail Reform Act and all federal law. They created a new standard that Judge Howell had made up and disseminated to the rest of the judges in D.C. to hold Jan 6ers to a different level of what they determined to be dangers that had nothing to do with actual danger, that allowed them to justify putting us into the DC jail. So I was denied. She literally screamed at me in court. They shackled me, flew me across the country, threw me in the DC gulag. I was initially put in general population, and they told 120 men of color that I was a racist, extremist, and dangerous. And then they let us mingle for 2 hours a day. So,
was that nerve-wracking?
Little bit. Yeah, I was fully prepared to die at that point. DC is one of the most dangerous jails in the country. There might be two that are worse. And I watch guys get stabbed in front of me regularly. There's regular fights. I had to fight for everything. I mean, toilet paper, a cup to drink out of. They would turn off water for punitive reasons. They wouldn't feed us. They're all corrupt. It was like there was a prison starter kit that I didn't get when we went in there, because every guy that was in intake had drugs, knives, cell phones, cigarettes, all being provided by the guards. And that's how I started off in there. And I had no idea there was any other Jan 6ers in there. I didn't know there was any support. That's when I broke down, and someone had put in my mind the idea of representing myself. And I was like, that's crazy. I can't defend myself against the government. But I broke down in the jail cell, and it was probably my first honest prayer. I just broke down. I said, God, get me out of here. And he answered me. And he said, you have all the talents and abilities to get yourself out.
Wow.
And I was pissed. I was like, God, that's the worst answer you could have given me right now. Like, send me a super lawyer or Superman. Get me out of here. I don't care which. But don't tell me that I can get myself out. And then I sucked it up and I said, okay, I know what I got to do. And I went into court a couple of days later with Judge Boasberg, and I told him I wanted to represent myself. And that little act of faith was what started all this. The day that I went to have my Feretta hearing to go pro se, because they have to determine that you're not insane or sane enough to represent yourself,
sure,
and that you understand it's a bad idea. I met my first Jan 6er.
Wow.
I met Brandon on transport. Brandon Fellows also represented himself pro se. And that's when I found out there were other Jan Sixers
in the DC gulag, as they called it, right?
Yep. In the gulag, I was supposed to be with them. So I had to have a sit-in to force the jail to put me in that pod rather than send me to another Gen Pop where I probably would have died. And I got brought to me the one piece of discovery that quite frankly, is going to come around to affect some massive change. There was a first piece of global discovery called DOJ CP001, U.S. Capitol Police reports of alleged misconduct. These were OPR reports by the DOJ of police officers, not who committed violence that day, but ones who didn't. Ones who they identified through their social media that might support Trump. And what they were doing was opening cases against them to try to go in and intimidate them. At the end of these reports, they asked each one of them, do you support Trump? To which they all had to say no. Are you part of any organization that supports Trump? And in these reports, they were these damning conversations that flew in the face of the very narrative of January 6th. Everything that I was reading was contrary to the official narrative right out of the mouths of the Capitol Police. But was even worse, within that there was supposed to be 50 reports. They were withholding half of them. So I hand wrote a motion in my cell with borrowed pen and paper because they wouldn't give me paper. They wouldn't give me access to discovery. They wouldn't give us access to a law library. I couldn't type anything. I had to handwrite out a 43-page motion that was given to Judge Boasberg that quoted all of these things. That went into the record in November, December of 2021. The last 3 pages, I highlighted all my civil rights that were violated and due process violations. He ruled on it and claimed, denied my motion, stating that I didn't make a legal argument. And that was it. Never addressed the fact that they were withholding exculpatory evidence, never addressed all the issues that were within the jail. And what happened because of that is I was retaliated against by the jail. I was sprayed, I was beaten, I was thrown into solitary over and over again. At one point, I spent over 100 days straight in solitary. And it got so bad with the jail lying about giving us by discovery that he ordered the general counsel of the jail to come in and explain why I wasn't getting my discovery. And in that hearing, I told the judge, I said, well, here's my 2 options. I have anything longer than 15 days in solitary by international standards is considered torture. I've been in for well over 90 days now. And my options are to continue getting tortured by my federal government, and I don't know how much longer I can hang mentally with this, or have an unfair trial. So I choose the unfair trial. He set the trial knowing that I was under duress and set me back to solitary.
Wow.
And within 36 business hours, they came and removed me from solitary and put me back in with the Jan Sixers.
Well, put you in with the Jan Sixers for the first time, or had you been with them for a while then?
I had been with them before, and at that point, I had done just over 100 days straight in solitary.
How did you keep from losing your mind in solitary, Brian?
I didn't.
You lost your mind?
Yeah. The human mind you can't go for months on end without meaningful contact with human beings in your bathroom without being able to shout. Like if you were in a bathroom with a broken shower, stay there. Don't know when you're getting help. Maybe food shows up through the door. Maybe it doesn't. You go crazy. I was lucky. I had a Bible. I did have some correspondence. What really kept me going, though, was this. I knew one day I was going to be able to, it would be done.
Yes.
Right? I would be able to come talk about it. Our forefathers saw this. They knew no matter how good a system of government they made, at some point the corruption would be real, that all three branches would be politicized and they would come against a small group of people or just a single person. The Constitution should be enough to stand against that, because the Constitution isn't there for the majority. It's there for the minority. It's there for the person that we all hate. That should have been enough. And this never should have happened. Average people shouldn't have had that level of tyranny, leveled against them.
Yes. Since you brought up the Constitution, I want to just raise something here, because it's always struck me as, sort of reprehensible that the media has ignored the fact that most of the January 6th defendants' constitutional rights were violated. Obviously, the First Amendment, because nobody was allowed a First Amendment defense, which protects political speech and peaceful assembly. And there was a peaceful assembly. I mean, it became violent in certain parts, but in part because of the actions of the police, who were also set up, in my view, from the work that I've done. So First Amendment is obvious. That's the most important defense that covers, why everybody went to the Capitol. And then Fourth Amendment, of course, unreasonable searches and seizures. I mean, we all know why they wrote that into there, because the British, could walk into anybody's home, violate your privacy, and you had no safe space, no space that belonged to you, and also no space to meet, right? And it was recognized that the federal government did not have the right to violate that. Well, that was violated over and over and over again with January 6th, with very unreasonable searches and seizures, going in with SWAT teams for people who are charged with one or two non-violent misdemeanor offenses. I mean, you got to be kidding me. You don't need a SWAT team for that. Fifth Amendment right, constitutional right, due process of law, guarantees fairness and neutrality in prosecution. I know you're just laughing. I write. Yeah. With a jury pool in D.C., if you got a jury, which was already completely and utterly, that jury pool was so tainted by politics. And then, of course, even if you had a bench trial, as you know, the same judges trying the same cases over and over again, judges like Boasberg, who showed exactly what they think of Donald Trump and what they're prepared to do, to subvert the law and the country and to get in his way. And, of course, the Fifth Amendment, due process of law, which guarantees fairness and neutrality in prosecution, right? Yeah. So that was the one I just talked about. And prolonged pretrial detention without conviction. How long were you held in pretrial detention without conviction?
I was lucky. I was only in there a year. I managed to get myself out.
A year before I
was a lucky one.
Yeah, and there were other people who spent how long?
Up to 4 years pre-trial.
Yeah, up to 4 years. So there you go. That's Fifth Amendment. Sixth Amendment, fair trial rights. Right to a speedy and public trial.
Yep.
Yeah. How many people waited years for their trials?
Well, the interesting thing to that is that it was violated by design. We never even had relativity or evidence.com until December of 21 or January of 22. We couldn't by design have a speedy trial. They arrested first and investigated second. So how are you arresting people when you can't even give them access to their discovery?
Yeah. Oh, and they had no desire to really give anyone access to their discovery because it tore their cases to shreds.
Yep.
That's what happened. They based most of their cases on social media posts and things that were completely and utterly fake. Our friend Luke Coffey, my co-host here, who was doing satirical characters, they used those characters in the courtroom as if they were serious. It's just ridiculous.
Well, and they would do answers. Like what they used against me wasn't even a Facebook post. It was a comment on something that they never presented what it was commenting on.
Right.
So
completely out of context.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and that, under fair trial rights in the Sixth Amendment, extended delays before trial. Yeah. I mean, how many January 6th defendants had that happen to them? Difficulties securing impartial juries. Yeah, there you go. Overwhelming discovery burdens on defense.
Yeah. Nobody's ever seen all their discovery.
Yeah. Limits on confrontation of witnesses in government conduct. There were no limits on the government conduct. So, I mean, the Sixth Amendment, was just obliterated for 99 to 100% of the January 6th defendants. Then the Eighth Amendment, excessive bail and punishments. I mean, you've just described that, right? Being put in one of the most violent prisons in the country. When a Minnesota judge where you're from already said you weren't a danger and you could stay home before your trial, and overruled by a DC judge.
Yep.
On what basis and for what reason? It's just ridiculous.
And I might note that was a liberal Minneapolis judge who ruled that I was
right
to be released.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't like you on safe ground in the first place. And then, of course, the other thing they did, just putting people's trials together, that kind of collective punishment, right? Collective responsibility. Like where you had someone whose case was pretty thin, just throw them in with someone where you thought you had a stronger case and make them all guilty by association, right? And the constitutional rights apply individually. So that was another constitutional violation.
People who had never met before January 6th or even met that day that were just close to each other. So they're like, oh, we're going to put you all on trial together.
Yeah, that was.
What are we talking about?
That's just insanity. So, I mean, we could spend more time on it. If you go through it point by point, you can see that, the constitutional rights of the January 6th defendants just didn't even exist, right? It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. And part of this is what motivated you to continue to fight, right? Because a lot of people will look at this and say, well, okay, you got your pardon, so now why don't you just shut up? What is it that you're doing right now? How are you fighting? And what is it that you think has people in the Department of Justice rattled about the case that you're pursuing? I know you've been all over Capitol Hill. You've been in Congress, knocking on doors, trying to get people to pay attention. I know you went to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and communicated with him because you were trying to get people to pay attention to a couple of significant things. Can you just take us through that?
Yeah. So beyond the issues that you hit on, all the Jan 6 stuff is kind of the background. This is the smallest part of it. Okay. So beyond all that crap, we had a whole nother thing going on. So what we had talked about with the First Step Act was basically when I was in prison, I started meeting other guys like you talked about who came from all walks of life and people that quite frankly, I never would have met otherwise. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that while Jan 6ers were unique from the political aspect of there had never been this kind of weaponization against a group this big and really this obvious, the manner at which the DOJ and the courts go about business, this wasn't unique, right? The overcharging, the just unfairness at trial, just sidestepping the Constitution. Every single person I met in prison was facing similar type things, where they would enhance things that didn't make sense. And every one of you are up against this impossible, the full weight and might of the federal government.
Yes.
If you fight us, you're going to lose.
Yeah, you don't stand a chance. Mm-hmm.
Nope. And we'll enhance you. So what I found is like, oh, we're going to hold this gun charge over you that could get you another 10 years. So you better plead out to this drug charge. But what I'm finding is there's guys in there for like, they're drug addicts. And they would sell drugs to finance their habit. And these guys would tell me over and over again, yeah, I sold drugs and I shouldn't have, but they're coming in acting like I'm some kingpin, this international drug kingpin. And all these guys were getting indicted for ghost dope, where they were never even caught with drugs. But somebody that they did catch the drug said, oh yeah, I've got it from this guy. And, I bought all this. Nobody ever saw it, but they would get them on a conspiracy. And now we pick up 14, 15 people on this same let's say 4 ounces of meth, and now we're charging everybody like a kingpin. And so at first you're kind of, okay, really, dude?
Yeah, like everyone in prison is innocent, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're thinking.
And I smell bullshit pretty quick, right? So, but when you start seeing the same things and you start looking at their paperwork and it all falls in line, well, the next thing that I figured out was the First Step Act, that this just wasn't being followed.
And the First Step Act, to remind people, is the criminal justice reform that was passed by President Trump in his first term. That was historic in many, many ways. It went a long way to trying to address a lot of these inequities in the prison system. It gave people the opportunity for redemption, even in a small way, right? That there is things that you can do under the First Step Act if you're taking steps in the right direction that can mitigate against your sentence. And one of the things that really bothered me that I've learned through my work over the years is that the Bureau of Prisons, and obviously I don't believe that this is still the case, although I have to confirm that. But what was happening under the Biden administration, I learned this through January 6th, and I'm sure it extends way beyond the J6s, is that the Bureau of Prisons will maintain one set of records inside the prison that reflects what a prisoner is actually doing. If you've gotten certain accrued certain sort of, let's see, advantages, right? Because you're following things under the First Step Act that count against your sentence. But then they would have a separate record, which is the one that they would present in court and to a judge. And that record could have whatever they wanted on it or not have things on there. So prisoners, it's really quite extraordinary. It's kind of like before COVID, I never believed that a hospital would try to kill someone, right? It's kind of like I never believed before January 6th that a prison would deliberately keep people behind bars because they make money out of it and because they have a prison, they have a system that is so corrupt with the guards that, and those running these prisons, and not just that, the contractors that are involved, that, and it's like a dark space. Nobody wants to look there because, who are you defending rapists and murderers,
Right. Yep. And that's 100% it. You nailed it on the head. And that's the thing, where we were able to connect way early on, is that you understood this. And not every reporter I've talked to had any clue even what the FSA was. So It's a little refreshing to be able to come in and just start talking from that standpoint. But that's exactly it. And it went even further to where there's a black hole in the BOP. There's money flowing through there that's completely unaccounted for. And none of what was set up with the FSA is being followed. And the DOJ was keeping people in the prisons from being able to bring this to the court. So what happened in my case, again, just crazy circumstances, they overcharged me with the 1512 obstruction when I turned down their plea deal. They gave a superseding indictment and tacked that on. Well, it got thrown out. So I was able to get...
It got thrown out by the Supreme Court because it was a document charge, and they misapplied it to January 6th defendants, and it failed. And that was what they were doing to elevate people's, sentences, because many people who only had nonviolent misdemeanors, class, B, class C, not even class A, they didn't have any leverage, really. Yep. And so they added that 1512 obstruction charge because it was a felony. And of course, it was
the threat of doing that,
or the threat of doing that, out. Right? And they need people to plea out, because when you're creating a false narrative, you need people to say, "Yes, I'm guilty," because that proves your false narrative, right? And you don't have real evidence to prove it because it's made up,
right? And that's what they were using against Donald Trump. They didn't have a felony to go after Trump with, so they made up the 1512. And if you had enough people who are found guilty of it and pled out to it, said, not only did I do it, but Donald Trump was the guy who planned it all.
Then they had a case against Trump.
Exactly.
That's how they were going to fabricate a case against Trump. Unbelievable. So you're going through all of this.
Wanted us in there. So I find out, I was supposed to be out November 4th of 2024. Come January 3rd of 2025, I finally get in for resentencing. I was the only person who successfully argued the First Step Act at that point. I don't know if anybody has since then, but every other case was kept out of court. And the only reason I was able to was because I backdoored them. I came into for resentencing for the 1512 that the Supreme Court overturned, but I argued my first act time credits. So my AUSA, Michael Gordon, came in and said, Your Honor, you don't have jurisdiction here. This is a bureaucratic issue within the BOP. Mr. Mock isn't alone. There's thousands of people, if you went throughout the VOP, that are in the same position arguing for their first time credits. And I look over, because I'm on Zoom like this, I look over at the guard that's there, and he's wide-eyed, and I look at him, and he goes, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, you did hear that, right? He said the quiet part out loud. And then he says, Your Honor, our fear is that if you rule in his favor, it will create a Pandora's box. So he's acknowledging that he knows these people are being illegally held. He's conspiring to keep me in and trying to get the judge to conspire with him to keep me in jail. Otherwise, all these other people can get out.
And by AUSA, you mean your assistant U.S. attorney. So he was the one who was prosecuting you.
That's the guy that prosecuted me. Yep. Trying to keep me in prison. This is 17 days before everybody knows Trump is going to pardon me anyway. And if they had kept me in the whole time of my sentence, I was only going to be in there until April 3rd.
So what were you sentenced to?
I got a 33-month sentence, which at the time we felt was a major win. I believe at this point, Boasberg gave me that sentence because he didn't want it to get appealed. There were things he was trying to cover up within my trial and what happened to me throughout being in D.C. And really that motion that I filed, it exposed a lot. So we thought it was a win, stupidly, because it was a low amount of time in prison. I'd already here. I was going to be in and out quick. What it really was there wasn't enough time to appeal anything because I was only going to be in such a short period of time. Even if I appealed it, I would be out and no one would ever see what had actually happened at my trial. So my trial transcripts had actually been requested by people within the judiciary. My trial transcripts are getting passed around to people at a pretty high level. And from what I found out later was being passed back and forth between the FBI and the DOJ.
And when was that happening?
Right after my trial, 2023, 2024.
So this is the Biden DOJ.
Correct.
And what is it that happened in your trial that you think Boasberg was trying to, keep hidden?
A number of things. The exculpatory evidence that was being withheld. I was, as a pro se defendant, not allowed to have access to my discovery. The entire database. Yeah. They ruled this on the record that I wasn't allowed to have specific videos that I had seen while I was in the gulag. Because for some reason, the last couple of months that I was in there, they opened up the entire Jan 6 database to us. I actually came out and leaked a bunch of information to the media. I was the reason that Christopher Wray had to go back in front of Congress and admit that they were undercovers at
well, good for you. That was a big admission.
It was fun. So I did find some crazy things in there. But when I came to trial and I said, I have specific videos that I've seen, not like, hey, let me just scan everything and see if I can find something, but actual exculpatory evidence that supports my case. And I was told I wasn't allowed to have access to it. I was denied the ability to have a witness there, the person that came with me. They wouldn't let me bring a witness. Roseanne Boylan. Mine was the first case. Tommy Tatum, I'd never met Tommy. We pulled him off the street, basically, because he was in D.C. and I needed a witness.
And he's another J6 defendant. I know that. We both know. Yeah.
Tommy's an interesting character. So Tommy comes in. I've never talked to him. And we just walk through the day. And the crazy thing is, having never met him before, we talked about Jan 6. His testimony matched mine almost verbatim.
Well, that's what happens when you're telling the truth.
That's exactly it. So we were the first case that got on the record that Roseanne Boylan was murdered by Lila Morris.
Yes, and Roseanne Boylan, for those who don't remember, was a lovely young woman who came from Georgia with her friend Justin Winchell, and she did not go inside the Capitol. She was swept up in that crowd at the West Tunnel and crushed under the people as the police were pushing everybody down. And then Capitol Police Officer Lila Morris, as Roseanne lay unconscious and dying on the ground, savagely beat her repeatedly. And she died. Of course, the media tried to say that it was a drug overdose, which was really a cruel thing to do, because Roseanne had struggled with addiction during her life and had beaten it. She had really fought valiantly and bravely, and she had won. And she was an inspiration to many of her friends. Funny, charming, and they painted her as some sort of worthless, drug addict. Whose death had kind of, nothing really to do with the violence on January 6th. And none of that was true. Not one bit of it was true. And of course, they cremated her body because of COVID. They pushed the family for permission to cremate her so that they could try to hide the evidence. But thanks to people like you and Tommy Tatum and Gary McBride, who found the video, former oil man from Texas who wasn't even at the Capitol, but spent, years combing through every piece of video he could find, and actually found the video that showed Lila Morris beating Roseanne Boylan as she's lying unconscious and dying on the steps of the Capitol. So, yes, your trial put that on record, and you're right. At the time, they did not want anything about Roseanne Boylan coming out. They still don't. No. But at that time, very few people knew about it.
Yep. Yeah, and that was one of the things that they were trying to cover. There's a whole host of them. And so that's why I believe I ended up with the sentence I did. So I was released on January 3rd, and actually Minnesota wouldn't let me back in the state. A long, crazy story I won't go into, but I was basically homeless for 17 days, living in a hotel in western Wisconsin, waiting for Trump to pardon me.
Because you'd just been released.
Yeah. So I was released. That was a weird 17 days. But then after that, I came down here where I'm at now in Southwest Minnesota, met Larvita, which is a whole nother crazy story that we'll get into at some point.
And Larvita is your better half, for those who don't know.
She is my best half. Yes. She is the one lady in Minnesota who never shut down her business during COVID. And Walls sent A.G. Ellison down to little tiny Lind of 450 people to attack her. She has a lifetime liquor ban, a lifetime food handlers ban, and the IRS just seized $10,000 out of her bank account in February for old OSHA fines related to his unlawful, I don't even know what you call, whatever the hell he had going on during COVID. So he basically...
So this is what she lost everything for, because she refused to close during COVID.
Yeah, it was because of a mask. Because she didn't want to force anybody to have a mask on. And give them the option of having a mask.
Right, and not that it matters, because I know Larvita, and she is a charming, smart, wonderful, brave woman. But she's also not white, right? Which would be an odd choice for a racist white supremacist.
Yeah.
That voted for Trump.
Yes. I really confuse people when they're like, oh, look at the hair. He's definitely a white supremacist. And then Larvita walks in. You're like, wait a minute. How are we supposed to take this? So I really confuse them then when I come in and I start talking about prison reform.
Nothing like the truth to get in the way of a good fake story.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So how we ended up here is that I started fighting for prison reform, basically right off the bat. We got in my truck. Me and Larvita prayed and said, God, send us where we're supposed to be. We ended up in D.C. via Texas because, of course, when you're going to D.C. for Minnesota, you go to Texas for
Yes.
all the. We were kind of your neck of the woods, and met Jenny McCombs, and a few other people down there.
Another J6er who has done God's work, building tiny homes and providing a refuge for January 6 defendants. Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
Amazing
Her
woman.
property is touched by God. It's such a cool place. And so we got a call for this. There was this prayer gathering in D.C. There was going to be some politicians there, and we left. And we never really left the D.C. area. And I started an organization that I've since abandoned. I worked with another organization. I represent me now. But I had a rally at the Capitol on March 27th. I put some of this out in the public space, and I called on Pam Bondi to arrest and indict my AUSA Michael Gordon.
Based on what exactly, Brian? Are you
basically that he was covering up the fact. Well, he knew that there were thousands of people being illegally held
in the prison
and that
system?
he's in the prisons,
And he's urging the judge to go along with it.
Urging the judge to cover this up. So if you're an officer of the court and you know that a crime is being committed, it's upon you to
You have a legal duty,
fix this.
yes, to address that.
Just
Yeah.
have people in prison. The crazy thing is he argued to keep me in prison longer to continue the cover up. And that was his argument. He didn't have any other argument to keep me in. It was just, yes, this is illegal. We're illegally doing it. But if we let him out, all these other thousands of people can then use this case to get out. So, Judge, just let it go. It's insane. And so when I started meeting all these people that had been in prison reform for decades, they all knew about what was going on with the FSA, exactly how you described it. But I said, hey, here's what my AUSA said in court. And every one of them goes, holy crap, he said that out loud? I said, yeah, that was his argument. And all of them go, I want these transcripts. So that's what set this off. And so I met with Oversight. I met with Jim Comer. I met Jim Jordan. Of course, Margie Taylor Greene. Again, I met with her. I met with so many different offices. I mean, we're talking dozens upon dozens of offices I've gone in and discussed Jan 6 issues and these prison issues, and specifically the FSA. I've met with lawyers for oversight in the judiciary. And if we fast forward to June, I finally got a meeting with the DOJ with Ed Martin. And this is well documented. I've done a number of reports. This has been on social media. And 11 days after my meeting with Ed Martin, my AUSA Michael Gordon was fired. He was the subject of this meeting. So was Boasberg. And basically what went on with Jan 6ers and prison reform.
And when was that meeting?
June, believe it was the 16th, somewhere mid to end of June. I have it written somewhere, but doesn't come right to mind, but right about that time.
Yeah. Of last year, right?
Correct. Yep. Of 2025. In the subsequent weeks, they requested follow-up information from the organization I was working with at the time of what was happening inside the prisons, because Director Marshall and Deputy Director Smith were talking about the FSA and trying to reform what was going on inside the prisons. And we were getting reports from inside the prisons that the wardens were having these town hall meetings and telling the people inside the prisons, we don't give a damn what the new director and deputy director say. Shit's staying the same way it is. So we don't want to hear anybody coming in here saying anything else. We don't want your family calling in here. Nothing's changing. So we reported this. So
That's called subversion, by the way.
oh yeah. It was crazy. So in response, Billy Marshall and Josh Smith created an FSA task force that people were supposed to in the prisons bring issues to them if they were not getting out when they should.
Yes.
And I went, oh, fantastic. We're actually having some effect. I went on TV. I thanked President Trump and the director, deputy director, and Ed Martin for actually working to correct this. And then weeks and months went by and nothing was changing. I'm getting contacted from people inside prison and nobody's getting out. And then I was tasked by the DOJ, asked to create a Jan 6 team. So this Jan 6 team that I was to create and bring on 5 other people were supposed to be going and bringing documents, evidence, statements from other Jan 6ers and bring that to the DOJ to specifically go after the judges and prosecutors and FBI. We started providing this. And then things just went dark.
When was that?
So that was late summer into fall. And it went quiet. So I eventually reached out to Pete Hegseth because we had a contact to him and we text. And I said, look, I believe it was right a couple weeks after Matthew Wepler had committed suicide, another Jan 6er. And it was just a kind of a dark time for Jan 6ers in that time frame. And I had said, Pete, we need some help with this. And he had said, I honestly haven't followed this enough. I've been kind of busy with the whole war thing.
Tens of thousands of people under his department that he has to run. Yeah.
But I'll give him all the credit in the world. He answered us. He didn't have to. And
no, he's a good man.
He's a cool guy. I like Pete. He said he would get this to Pam Bondi. And I put in a request for a meeting with Pam Bondi and some in legal, White House counsel, somebody from the White House to discuss this and understand exactly what was going on. Because what I found out in my dealings with the DOJ is nobody understood these Jan 6 issues like I did. And nobody understood these BOP issues like I did. Which was bizarre to me. I'm like, I'm a landscaper from Minnesota. How the hell do I know all this and you people don't? So I'm trying to get this meeting to get people up to speed, thinking maybe naively that, hey, if they understand this fully, they can go down the road to fixing this. I was looking for internal mechanisms to be fixed.
Including, by the way, the impeachment of Judge Boasberg, right? For knowing that a crime was happening, allowing it to happen, and doing nothing to stop it.
100%. And that was part of what I had filed. Well, there's crickets from Pam. So I had moved forward. I actually fired my attorney who was supposed to be filing a tort claim for me. And I decided, like always, to do it myself. So
a lot cheaper, Brian.
It is a lot cheaper. Yeah, save a little bit. So at the beginning of December, I filed my tort claim and an OIG complaint. 2 days later, I fly into DC and filed a judicial complaint and a House Judiciary impeachment statement against Boasberg. And I brought it out to House reps, brought it to Thomas Massey. I brought it to Wesley Hunt. And to date, I've heard nothing from their offices.
And your OIG complaint, did you submit that to Department of Justice OIG? IG?
Yes. Yep.
I see. And you've heard nothing?
They kicked it around within their office. They kicked it off to OPR, and they kicked another one over to the BOP. They're playing past the potato. So no one wants to take responsibility for it.
So this is the problem that President Trump is dealing with. That these agencies are full of people who don't actually work for him.
Yep, 100%. That's the problem we're seeing. And I don't know if Ed Martin really wanted to do anything about this and is being thwarted in his efforts. I don't know at this point.
Well, Ed Martin is head of the Weaponization Working Group, right? That's his title, and that's the department that he has. But he has this problem that he can't get any people. And he can't get any money. And that problem is happening very specifically because of the person at DOJ who's in control of that. And I'm going to give you the name right here. Jolene is her name, but I want to make sure that I get her last name correct. Her name is Jolene Ann Lauria. American civil servant currently serving as the U.S. Assistant Attorney General for Administration on a permanent basis since December 21st, 2023. And after having served in that position in an acting capacity. So, this is the person who consolidated all of those budgets and personnel and all that power really under the Biden administration, and now isn't giving Ed Martin anything that he needs to get the job done. And I'm not saying, I don't know everything about what they're doing and not doing, but the frustration is very real. And I've known Ed Martin for many years. I have never known that man to back down on anything that he believes in. Actually, a very interesting man, spent some time working at for the Pope as a very young man on a kind of internship, if I remember correctly. But anyway, Ed Martin has always been, all through the Biden years, he gave everything as a staunch supporter of the January 6th defendants. So the idea that now he would just suddenly not care, I don't buy it.
Well, that's the question is, and I can't put motive to people. All I can do is say, look, I've reported these things.
And this is what has or has not happened.
Exactly. And so what happened internally with that, I don't know. But when you've got the House and the Senate both talking about impeachment of a sitting chief federal judge, and someone walks into, the weaponization czar and says, here's enough information to impeach this judge, you would think that some conversations would be had about that.
So maybe there were. And we don't know who's blocking it.
That's the questions that I think some intrepid reporters could ask of.
Well, they certainly did. Do you know any? Let me see if I can find one.
Yeah, you could dig one up.
This one's a little tired. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't blame you.
This one's a little overwhelmed. No, it's all right. It's okay. That's the nature of it.
It's what you do.
It's the nature of it. Yes, we're definitely going to ask. This has been on my top of my dance card for the last few weeks. I've been trying to figure this out and find out exactly what's going on, because the weaponization working group was also created with people in it, leaders from every different section that you would need to actually move forward with action. So it was designed and set up correctly, but it doesn't have money and it doesn't have people. So, that's ridiculous that you can block something that significant that comes from the orders of the President of the United States himself, who's personally invested in this because he understands how terrible it was, how the justice system and law enforcement, FBI and all that was used. And by the way, the JTTF and what else? Warrantless surveillance. We haven't even gone there. Right? There was a federal judge that said early on that January 6th defendants were illegally surveilled. So we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the constitutional violations and the criminal acts carried out against January 6th defendants. No one's been held accountable. And, you're a year in. I've heard some people say, oh, it's only a quarter of the way. And it's like, I'm not sure you're reading the political map that is in front of all of us. Because on that map, the midterms are coming up. And 6 months out from the midterms, maybe more, if they start talking indictments of, big people like, Obama and John Brennan and, and so on, they're going to say, oh, no, you can't do that. It's election interference. You have to wait till after the midterms, because they're hoping in the midterms to take the House and the Senate and impeach Trump.
Yep. And it all goes away.
And it all goes away. And then you know what happens, though, Brian? Because
they come back around.
Because nothing has been done to hold people to account for the kind of thing that you're talking about. And I'm not saying I shouldn't say nothing has been done, because there are things that have been done, but effectively, those people are still in play. That's the thing. They're all still in operation. People who was targeting Trump in his first administration are still targeting him now. They're subverting him from within, inside his own administration, inside these agencies and departments, and they're waiting him out.
Yep.
And then they're coming for people like you yet again.
Yep. Well, and here's what's crazy. It is...
And me.
I put this all together. Yeah, you're on... I'm sure you're on a few lists.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I... put this all together in a risk assessment back on December 29th when it was clear that nobody was responding and they were passing the hot potato around. So I wrote a risk assessment, and this was the first time. It was 30 some odd pages. And it was the first time that I had taken all of this because there had been bits and pieces that had gone to different types of oversight. Like Judge Boasberg should have been some oversight initially that failed, right? And there should have been some from the DOJ that failed. And there were some other pieces from the FBI that failed. And so you take all these pieces, and any one of them, you can kind of talk that away. But when you put it collectively, you see the systemic failure of oversight across all these vast agencies through multiple administrations. And so I brought this to the White House. I put it to Pete Hegseth and said, can you put this in front of White House counsel? Because that's what they do, is they assess risk all day long. And I put it up through the DOJ, and I sent one through the State Department asking them to get to White House counsel as well. So I had 3 different avenues. And said, hey, in a week, can you just respond to me and tell me you received this? And who's the person to contact on this so that I can talk about some of these issues and answers? Pretty basic.
Yeah.
I've got a tort claim with you, so you're going to have to talk to me at some point, because otherwise I'm going to have a lawsuit and we got to do this whole dance. Let's just have a conversation. Give you the opportunity to course correct. And again, peanuts. So at this point, I feel that I've exhausted every possible remedy. I've hit everybody in Congress that matters, every single committee. I've gone to the White House. I've gone to the DOJ. I've done what I can. And the day that I was in D.C., Billy Marshall and
So just to remind people, is head of Bureau of Prisons. Trump appointed him.
Prisons went on their podcast and stated, to your point, that they have been trying to get the FSA fixed. They have been trying to get people out, and they thought initially that it was just like the bureaucratic issues, but found that it was massive fraud.
Yeah.
They admitted to it being massive fraud on their own podcast. This on the heels of me putting this OIG complaint that's getting passed back to them. Now, it may be coincidence that it came out at that time. It may be some political cover. I don't know.
Or it may be that, they've been trying to get attention to it, right? But, well, I mean, I know they've been trying to get attention on it and do something about it, because I've talked to Billy Marshall and to Josh Smith, his deputy, about this very issue. And they were aware of it before I brought it to them, well aware of it, because they know the prison system from the inside. I mean, Josh Smith has spent time in prison many years ago, and actually, because he was in a white-collar prison, learned from people that he was in there about business. When he came out, he made a lot of money, and he has a foundation that has done extraordinary work with on criminal justice reform. I mean, Billy Marshall and Josh Smith are 2 of the nicest people you could ever meet. But they're not just nice, they're smart. And most importantly, they are not part of the corrupt system inside the Bureau of Prisons. I mean, whatever, complaints people might have about them, and I share your frustration because you've been going to try to get this addressed, and you're getting crickets from everywhere. But I wonder what is standing between these good men and fulfilling their promises, which I know they mean. Because, if you've been incarcerated inside the criminal justice system and you have lived it, you have witnessed it firsthand, nobody comes out of that unscathed. Just nobody. And, when you talk to Billy Marshall and you talk to Josh Smith, I know how hard they're working. I know they're giving everything they've got. They would change it all overnight if they could. So what is standing in their way? It is really an indictment on our system of government and on what is going on in the administration and how people are being blocked and subverted. I mean, we know when the pardons were issued by Trump, how many prisons tried to subvert the president's orders?
Yep.
Right? I mean,
all the ones in blue states.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do next, Brian?
Yeah. So, and I agree with you 100% on that. I don't doubt that they have made some efforts to get this resolved. I think I believe them when they say we tried this, but there's so much fraud and corruption that we're getting stonewalled. And that's scary when you have the director and deputy director that are creating a mandate and the bureaucracy is so corrupt and there's so much fraud occurring to the tune of billions of dollars that they can't even come in there and change anything. So that's where we need Congress to step up. That's where we need the DOJ to step up. And the fact that I brought all this, I've hit this really end of the road to where my options now are a legal route. I can file my suits, and I'm doing that. That's the next couple of steps. But I am going public with this. I've kept a ton of this, really to myself and a handful of people as I've been trying to go through the whole process of getting oversight to actually occur. And now I've exhausted that. There will be a series of articles coming out here in the future. We'll start putting some documents out there.
And basically what you're talking about, just to remind people, to sum it up, is you're talking about the fact that criminal justice reform was passed under the First Step Act. It allows for prisoners, time earned, right? It's not just, it's kind of an extension of the good behavior thing.
Yes.
And prisoners are being denied their rights under the First Step Act. That's essentially what's happening. Their records are being
the law.
Their records are being altered.
Legally released when you earn your time off, and they're just saying no. We're just going to keep you in prison.
I mean, like, a lot of people will just find that even hard to believe. I found it hard to believe the first time. But if I have I have a friend who's in prison, and there's a guy in the prison with him whose sentence ended a year ago.
Yep.
And he can't get anyone in the prison to meet with him. He can't get a case officer to care. And so when I raise
get it to the judges,
you can't get it to the judges either.
DOJ. The DOJ is blocking people from getting it there because what they say is it's an internal bureaucratic issue, which means you have to exhaust every remedy within the BOP before you're allowed to bring it, even file a motion with the courts, which is like a 6-month process minimum to go through.
Oh, yeah, please. The appeal process. And you have to have a lawyer, and not everybody's capable of representing themselves. And, and the system's probably going to eat them alive anyway. And so but it is just unfathomable that you have people. I mean, fine. I'm all for law and order. If you have committed a crime, we have seen the results, especially in blue states, of what it is when you decriminalize criminal behavior. So no one's advocating for that, just to be very clear on that. But if you have served your time, even if you were guilty of your crime and you were, rightly sentenced, when your punishment is over, you are allowed to go home.
Yeah. This isn't asking anything other than to follow basic laws and humanity. And what's crazier with it too is that notion, and I want to touch on this real quick before we wrap up, is the idea of these criminals. This First Step Act was written to earn your time credits, your time off. You have to be a low recidivism. So violent offenders aren't getting First Step Act rights. You've got certain crimes that keep you from even being able to
be eligible.
So
yeah,
exactly. So when you get eligibility, you have to hit certain tiers, and you have to actually program and take these classes and do a lot of things to prove.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that's involved.
And the idea is that it's people who have screwed up. And we're going, okay, instead of giving you a lesser sentence, you're going to earn that lesser sentence. You're going to prove that
you're worthy.
You're serious about
yes.
it. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's who we're letting out. So it's not like we're singing, hey, a bunch of gangbangers and rapists and murderers, we should just let you out of prison, which maybe some activist judges would like to see. But this isn't that on the federal level. These are low-level offenders who might have had drug issues, white-collar things, fraud cases. These are not, and I've met these people. You would have no idea on the street if you met these people that this was someone who was guilty of a federal crime. They're just being held in there, and it's for monetary gain. That's it.
It's because the more people you have in the prison system, the more money they can make out of you.
Yep. And the DOJ that's supposed to handle this, the BOP is underneath of the DOJ. So the bigger the BOP budget, the bigger the DOJ budget. Mm-hmm. And the people who should be the oversight is the House, and the House Judiciary has absolutely failed at this. To this point, I believe it's by design. The things that I have uncovered that I won't go into fully here.
Why not?
Is that, well, there's a few more investigative things I have to go through. But
okay, we'll let you off then.
Yeah, I know where the money's coming back around. Long story short is the money's going back in the politicians' pockets. And so this is a big money laundering operation within the BOP. That's what I've uncovered. And those that should be providing oversight are getting money by keeping people illegally held in prison. That's fact.
Well, when you have evidence of that, we would be very interested in talking more about it and in sharing that evidence. Not that I doubt your word, and it's certainly plausible, but like you said, you have some more investigating to do. It's certainly on the surface, I can see no good reason why the House Judiciary Committee or any of the oversight committees have not done anything about this. There's just no excuse for it at this point. I mean, it's outrageous how little is being done. And for those people who say, well, we still have time or they need time, I was very patient throughout the first year, but we don't have an awful amount of time. Brian, I know just on the last thing to close here, personally, I know this has been very rough on you. Your story was very difficult. You were turned in by one of your sons that had to hurt, right?
Yeah, sorta. Yeah, I forgave him instantly. That's my kid. I love him.
Yeah.
There were other people who were influencing him.
Yeah.
To make a phone call, and I know what it was. So at the end of the day,
yes,
I actually questioned him at my trial because he was a witness, and I told him right there. I said, "Hey, the last things I said to him at trial, because you have to question him. I said, I love you. You're not responsible for this, right? Yeah, that. I said, I love you, and there's nothing that could change that. And that was the end of the question. And through all this, I just hope he doesn't feel responsible for what happened, because he isn't. The one thing that is interesting that he did say after he got a chance to view the actual evidence of January 6th,
mm-hmm.
he realized everything he was told about January 6th was a lie. And he said if he had seen the evidence that I showed him after the fact, that he never would have turned me into the FBI, because he knew at that point that everything that they had said was a lie.
Yes, I'm sure. Well, I'm glad that you are out. I'm glad that you are still fighting. This is something very close to my heart. I feel terribly for people who are there who feel forgotten. We don't want people coming out of prison in ruins, right? I mean, we're better off in our society if they come out of prison, and they're able to function and they're able to reclaim a decent place in society and live a decent life. I mean, that's what you should want. I feel like that's what you should want for everybody who serves their time, and comes out. And so, and having the ability, having more programs inside prisons that teach skills, that give people the opportunity to actually build something instead of sit back into the only things that they've ever known. Or just the difficulty that I know many January 6th defendants have experienced this, just, trying to survive with a criminal record, even though they're pardoned, it's still on their record. So it's very, very difficult. And then, of course, you still face the threat right? That people are going to come after you and try and put you back in prison.
Yeah, that's very real. The things we face every day, every case, I say this, if you're found guilty, the way our system is now and the way our society is, it's a lifetime sentence.
That's right. Every punishment is a lifetime sentence.
Yep. And we're facing it. It feels different for a lot of Jan 6ers, I feel like, because there's still the political part of this.
Yes.
And people will always hate us for that politics. And we still get death threats from these people on a regular basis. We're still ostracized from parts of society for it. And it's ridiculous. But one of the things I would like to just end up with here is, I watched President Trump. They put this thing on the White House website here recently about January 6th. And it talked about how the government was weaponized against Trump. And it really was. And he alluded and touched on the fact that we were weaponized against as well. But here's the bigger thing. This was all to get him and destroy MAGA. We didn't turn on Donald Trump. I would have gotten a lesser sentence. They would have taken me out of being tortured within the DC jail if I just said, yes, I was guilty and it was all Donald Trump. Me and a bunch of other people faced torture by our federal government and stood by that man and refused to lie and turn on him. We have people out here committing suicide over this. We have people who've been killed over this.
That's right. Matthew Perna,
they've lost everything. Yep. Matthew Webler. There's a whole host of guys who've committed suicide. We need restitution.
That's right.
This whole thing for me personally has cost me over $1 million in counting. Money doesn't fix everything, but it's a little level of saying, yes, the government did you wrong.
Yes.
This signals that and gives us the ability to restart our lives. It gives a little comfort. I'm 47 and I can't go get the business back that I had before this. I'm starting from scratch. We have people in their 60s and 70s who are having to go back to work with nothing. And people that can't even find work because they're ostracized from this.
Yeah.
The government does owe us something at this point.
Oh, without a doubt. I 100% agree with you. The government does owe you because you were wrongfully targeted. And, the American people are owed the truth, right?
Yes.
I mean, everyone, we want the whole truth. I know Peter Tickton, who's an amazing attorney, was Trump's attorney, a lifelong friend of Trump's. Peter Tickton said to me that they have evidence, video evidence of planning that goes back sometime before January 6th itself. And so we want to see that. We want to see all of that evidence. We want to see people held to account for what they did. And not only do we want to see it, it's critical. Otherwise, this is just going to happen again.
Absolutely.
Well, Brian, keep us posted on how things go. Thank you for fighting. I know there are a lot of people across this country, people of every race and description, particularly, of course, a lot of people in the Black community who are very familiar with these issues, who have lived with them for many, many years, many of whom don't have attorneys, don't have families to support them, don't have lives to come back to. And my heart breaks for these people because they're forgotten and disregarded. That's why I've always been a Johnny Cash fan, because I loved when he went into Folsom Prison and treated people with humanity. And I'm not saying give them a free pass. I'm just saying treat people with humanity. And follow the law. You can't punish people for breaking the law and then go ahead and break the law. What's that? Right? That's ridiculous.
Weird concept there, Lara.
Yeah. So thank you, Brian, so much for everything that you're doing. I know there's other J6s out there too who are struggling. Just want them to know it may feel like you're forgotten. When there's so much other news going on, it's hard to stay focused on that. But you're not forgotten. And God bless you. I'll say a prayer for you and for all of the others. Remember you, and we'll pray for accountability and pray for justice and restitution.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for everything that you've been doing.
No, nothing. You know what to do. If you're watching this, you need to like, you need to share it. Please share it, subscribe, go to laralogan.com, support independent journalism. If you want to, you can support us just by sharing the word, getting it out to people. Let voices like Brian's, let them be heard so that people in this country know the truth. Know ye the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, thank you for being bold enough to go rogue with Lara Logan.